fun fact about me, I have never actually seen any of JLo's live action movies. Now I can hear my girlfriend somewhere, wherever she is right now, being like, what do you mean that you've never seen The Cell before? And I know I'll sort it at some point, but today is not that day, because priorities involve a massive, massive snake. I'm a 90s baby. I was born in 91, and most of the horror movies that got me into watching horror were from the mid to late 2000s. I expanded more into 80s horror last year, but 90s horror is still very much uncharted territory for me. And from what I can gather when browsing the internet, it's a very mixed decade for horror. It's a lot of hits and it's a lot of misses. But two movies that often get brought up are Anaconda and Lake Placid, and the fact that these two franchises came head to head in a Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator, Sadako vs. Kayako, we won't talk about that one, sort of head to head at one point is wild. The fact that this was the battle of the creature features. You can expect me to watch Lake Placid at some point going into summer, because massive alligator. Like, the bigger an alligator is in a horror movie, the more likely I am to watch it. But today is not about a massive alligator, it is about a massive anaconda in the Amazon rainforest. Now, if you've never heard anything about Anaconda from 1997, let me quickly fill you in. A National Geographic film crew is taken hostage by an insane hunter who forces them along on his quest to capture the world's largest and deadliest snake, and plans on using their boat to target it by any means necessary. If you're new here, I go by Hordes and I talk about all things horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays, but as always here on my channel, I am now going to go and watch Anaconda from 1997 off camera, so that way if you still haven't seen this movie and you want to watch it too, nothing will be spoilt for you, because nobody wants to watch a movie that you've just watched somebody else watch from start to finish.
Why did it have to be snakes?
The original Texas Chainsaw taught me, do not trust strange hitchhikers. Thank you, Nubbins Sawyer. Anaconda teaches me, do not trust strangers in the Amazon who have conveniently lost their boat.
One of the locals just stole my boat!
I want to start by saying that snakes don't actually scare me. I don't mess with them, they don't mess with me, I'm not about to mess with the status quo. But I did some Googling because I was curious as to how big anacondas actually are. I know they're a big snake, but most of them are about 20 feet. But the biggest one on record is actually 33 feet, which, to put into context, is half a bowling lane, which is 66 feet long. So two of the biggest anacondas they've ever found would be a bowling lane, which is kind of insane. Now, I know somebody out there is probably like, Hordes, why are you Googling this? And the answer to that is, I wanted to know if it was actually possible for an anaconda to get to the size that this thing is in this movie. Because, let's be honest, if anacondas can get to that size, nobody wants to come face to face with it, and it would make this movie just that little bit more terrifying if you knew that something this size was actually sitting out there in the Amazon rainforest. Plot-wise, it's really easy to follow. A group of documentarians end up in the wrong place at the wrong time and then end up paying for it as they wander through the habitat of this enormous anaconda while in the company of a strange poacher that thinks that this thing is worth $1 million. Even though it is fairly straightforward, it does have some slow moments intermixed with the action sequence, and I did feel like I was waiting for the snake to come back to keep moving the story along. So there is that, and it does feel like there are a couple of throwaway characters in this, you know, who are just waiting for the moment that the anaconda turns up, unhinges its jaw and kills them. Have you ever come across a character who is so obviously suspicious that they might as well be a suspect in the game LA Noire?
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
Subtlety was never a thing in LA Noire when they did the face capture for the suspects in that game, and Paul the Poacher is so sus. Like, this guy could have a giant neon sign above his head that says, "It was me," with an arrow pointing down at him. Like, so sus, like, the entire time. And luckily, none of the other characters ever were like, oh, it couldn't possibly be any of the people that, you know, we know and have worked with before, and it's definitely not this guy. No, they saw through it and were like, this guy is dodgy as hell. Like, you know, the Cardi B sus meme.
That's suspicious.
The Mayor's Ascension in Buffy the Vampire Slayer's season 3 finale is how I judge if CGI from the 90s has aged well, because that episode has aged horrendously. And if you want to giggle, if you've never seen it, just Google The Mayor's Ascension from Buffy season 3. You won't regret it. It's the funniest thing you'll see for a while. Now, the CGI in this is a little bit sus at times, but it's not aged that badly compared to some of the other things that I've seen from the 90s. You wouldn't think that this also came out in 1997, the same as the episode of Buffy that I've mentioned. Now, there is one exception to this bad CGI, and it is bad CGI in this case, and that is when Owen Wilson's character of Gary spins around like Linda Carter's Wonder Woman and they added the snake in post. Like, it's so bad that I actually laughed out loud, but I can forgive it. I can forgive it for that, because the practical effects in this, they've actually aged really well. If you are a snake expert, does the Anaconda look like an actual anaconda? Who knows? But I'm not a snake expert, so I can actually say that this was fairly decent. One scene in particular that I won't spoil is when the animatronic / puppet turns up and there is lots and lots of fire involved. Like, that scene was great. And the puppet looks great in that. And as I found out on IMDb when I was doing a little bit of research after, one of the animatronics in this at one point went rogue, and they actually kept its footage in because it looked better than what they'd actually planned. And that is great. I have to knock points off though for the soundtrack. Like, this soundtrack goes way harder than it needs to, and at times it's a bit like a 90s live action kids movie. Like, if you've ever seen Beethoven, it goes as hard as that film. So somebody when doing this soundtrack went absolutely ham on string instruments, and it's a little bit too overdramatic, and it's too much. It's so distracting. Like, yes, I get it's an action movie, but your soundtrack should not be more dramatic than what is actually happening on screen. The acting is decent. The plot is lacking a little bit in places, and it's certainly more fun than it is a horror movie. And because of this, I'm actually going to say that this is a fairly decent entry horror movie for somebody that is looking to start watching horror movies but doesn't want something that's really gory or really intense. So think of Anaconda as an adventure movie that has elements of horror and thriller and action in it. And while it does have a little bit of blood and a little bit of gore, it is kept to a minimum, and it really does it's there because it's needed to be there to enhance the plot and actually advance the plot forward, rather than being there for, say, shock value or to like push buttons. Like, it's needed, but it's kept to a minimum. I'm actually going to give Anaconda from 1997 a 3 out of 5 stars, because this movie is actually a 15 rated here in the UK. And in my opinion, it is a very, very tame 15 rated movie. It's a fun movie, like, don't get me wrong, like, it was still worth a watch. But if I'm in the mood for an adventure horror movie, there is a movie that came out only 2 years after Anaconda, which is a far superior movie. Am I going to reach for Anaconda when The Mummy exists? Sadly, no. So there you have it, my initial thoughts and my review for my first time watching Anaconda from 1997. If you've also seen this movie, I would love to know what your thoughts and opinions are down in the comments section down below. If you would like to know every single horror movie that I watch, not just the ones I talk about here on YouTube, you can find me over on Instagram and Letterboxd at HordesOfHorror, and I post brand new videos here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays. So I will be back on Monday with another solo movie review from a franchise which is very near and dear to my heart, but I have not seen the reboot of this and I'm kind of nervous about it. So until next time, bye.